platform started in 1983. It was started by a group of students. It was a call from a group of students from the arts and from theatre for other students from politics and campaigning to meet. And there was a feeling that if artists were to collaborate with people from politics background, from campaigning and activism, that not only would the art become more politically effective, but the campaigning could become more imaginative. In terms of starting new campaigns or new projects, it's been quite a long while that we've been working on one topic, i.e. fossil fuels, and how critical it is that the world moves away from consuming fossil fuels. It's critical for reasons of human rights. It's critical for reasons of disproportionate impacts on usually racialised, usually poorer communities where oil is to be found. It's critical for climate change reasons. It's critical for health reasons. It's a finite resource. It's critical to not waste that finite resource on the things that we're using it for at the moment when we have renewable sources. So we started doing that in 1995. And the decision making there was, well, we had been working on water in the late 80s and 90s and looking at London and the way London treats its fresh water and metaphors around water in the city, democracy, water. So we did a project called Homeland, which sort of went between all the work on water and London and then all the work on London as an oil city. So it was like a point of change.
Well, I must say that working with Platform has been a baptism of fire. The memorial for Ken Saro-Wiwa was a competition, and I didn't know whether to go for it or not. And I spoke to my family, and they said, go for it. And why was I reluctant to go for it? I was reluctant because I didn't want to put myself in the firing line, or my family in the firing line, because, oil is an important part of our lives. My brother used to work for Shell as a medical doctor. My extended family work with Shell, and they're engineers and security guards and all sorts of things. The main employer in Port Harcourt in past times was Shell, and to get onto their team was a big deal. It meant that your family was secure. Who was I in comparison to Ken Saro-Wiwa? And he got into trouble with his interaction with Shell. So I was reluctant and a little scared to take part in the competition. But I took part in it because, the family said, well, it's art and you're not in Nigeria, you're in England and stuff like that. But, things can happen anywhere. So I took part in the competition, and I wanted to make a sort of campaigning bus and a battle bus, like the politicians have for campaigning to, be a Democrat or a Republican or whatever, in driving around the country seemed to be a key sort of element. And then I have a love of, trucks and things anyway, just because trucks in West Africa are changed in all sorts of ways to Africanize them, and they look like sort of Mad Max vehicles. They are overloaded with piles of goods, or they have beautiful paintings on them with words that say, God is best, or whatever, God knows best, or God knows.
When I got the commission to do the Be the Curator, it was made very clear to me that the project was to be collaborative and collegiate. So not that it would be my ideas, my way of thinking. So it was decided that rather than to choose an artist, that it be open to the public, and that anybody who had an idea would be allowed to send in their ideas about a commission for a memorial. The difference is that they needed to think about the memorial as a modern memorial and as what we called it a living memorial. By living, we wanted it to be something which was not fixed or statuesque or very Victorian, but something which was much more contemporary, much more conceptual, and much more fluid within a narrative of popular culture. We had a panel, and from our panel we shortlisted the ideas, and the projects we decided to realise was Sakari's project.
My structure is very, very basic. It has Ken's words around it, which is, a shouting thing that shouldn't be forgotten, because, it just says what happened. And then, having the kind of thing of the other 8 activists that were killed at the same time, I think is a fitting memorial because they were on his team, they died the same time as him.
I accuse the ethnic majority who run Nigeria of practicing genocide against the Ogoni people. I accuse the oil companies which prospect for oil in Ogoni of encouraging genocide against the Ogoni people. I accuse Shell and Chevron of practicing racism against the Ogoni people because they do in Ogoni what they do not do in other parts of the world where they prospect for oil.
In my research, I listened to some interviews that Ken Saro-Wiwa did, just before he was killed, and he was so passionate and so articulate about, the plight of the Ogoni people and just how important it was to recognise the injustice of this kind of exploitation of people that have absolutely no power as a sort of corporate body coming into a country and just messing up people's lives without any kind of payback or questions or anything. He really highlighted things, and his words saying, I accuse the oil companies of practicing genocide against the Ogoni is painful, hurtful, and so correct because, in the Delta we are scattered. We can't live or work in our place of birth. And why? Because of bad governance, environmental pollution, no work. And, Shell has a part in that. And what can I say? It's unforgivable, really.
The reason we went for Sakari's project was for 2 reasons. One was that the artist herself came from the background from where Ken Saro-Wiwa came from. So we felt that there was an artist who was actually in tune with his homeland and his environment. And more importantly, for me, as a curator, the work that she proposed was the idea of a rendering of a Nigerian bus, which she called Battle Bus, which she felt that would symbolize Ken and also his colleagues. 10 years ago, 2005, we commissioned the bus, we unveiled the bus toured, and the idea of the project and the name of the project was called RSW, Remember Saro-Wiwa. That was because we wanted people to remember Ken Saro-Wiwa and to also remember what he had achieved and remember what work needs to be done in relationship to oil companies, and also what was happening in the Ogoni land as well. So this project had to do several things. It had to animate the space it was in, then it had to create an environment and a program of activities in that space to make people understand what the piece was about. So the idea to have a piece of public art in the environment, which is about the environment, sounds strange, but actually was very complicated. So Sakari's piece had to do all of those things. It had to be an art piece, it had to be an art piece which was in an environment which was public, and it had to then contest that environment with the question of environmental racism.
If you go here in the United Kingdom, you don't see any gas being flared. You cannot pollute River Thames. They will jail you straight away. You will just remain in prison for a very long time. But they can go to our place and pollute our rivers and refuse to clean it. That's the difference. They will pollute and refuse to clean it. And that is what we call environmental racism. You do what you cannot do in your country to the people, the communities where you operate. What is that if it's not racism?
So, for example, there was Shell Better Britain campaign in the 90s and in the 2000s. And that there was money inside the Shell Better Britain campaign, charitable money, to be given to fund environmental projects in the UK. So we thought to ourselves, well, hang on, Shell's making profit in Nigeria and not cleaning up with catastrophic results. They make profit. Then they become a good corporate citizen by putting money into education and environmental projects here in Britain to clear up polluted land or to do environmental restoration in Britain. Huh? How does that work? That doesn't work. That's colonial. You know, they're not putting the money in as a good corporate citizen to clean up in Nigeria. They're taking profit and putting it into their charitable wing to clean up generic mess or difficult things or problematic things or to make nice things happen in Britain. So we had this thing of Shell Better Britain, Shell Worse Nigeria. Right.
Under that programme, Remember Saro-Wiwa, it took nearly 10 years for the bus to do all those different things, which was a lot, actually. And when it came to the 20th anniversary, it was decided that because we had done that, because we had done Remember Saro-Wiwa, because the bus had toured and because the bus had already animated the different environments it was in, it was important now for the bus to take on another level of action, which meant that it had to go to Nigeria.
So the bus kind of spread out in a way that I didn't design, but I guess, you know, Ken's memory designed it in a sense, because he was an advocate of being able to speak and write and be informed. So I guess in a way, all my structure is an emblem, and it's had quite an adventure. The fact that we decided that it could go to Nigeria was mind-blowing, really. You know, I think I approached it as naively as possible, just because an artist can. And my naivety isn't a sort of, it is not a shortcoming, really. It's just looking at the situation from different eyes. You know, take this gift to Nigeria, a gift of information, a gift of our past, and affect the future. Quite simple. Let us try and find a way to clean up the Niger Delta. Quite simple. But it seems to have created quite a storm. Just because I think people are afraid of history. Yeah, they're afraid of their past. What's the point of being afraid? It's the past. You should be looking forward and trying to change the path.
It couldn't go to Nigeria 10 years ago because it needed to do the work here first. But because of the 10 years and because of all the work it did, it was decided that the next stage had to mean the bus had to go to Nigeria. So then it meant that we had to change the name of the program. It was no longer called Remember Saro-Wiwa. It was called Action Saro-Wiwa, because we wanted to be more action. We wanted people to think that, you know, things hadn't changed and that things still need to be done to raise ideas and consciousness around what was going on in Nigeria, but also what was going on around the planet. And that again, the bus had to be then put in a situation in another environment, i.e. Nigeria, to think about how it can then stimulate that environment and somehow come home to Ken Saro-Wiwa, because the bus was actually making its journey home, which was important. During that phase, it was important that the bus somehow was sent off with some kind of program. And for us, we felt, Jane in particular, it was important that the bus have a legacy and a lasting event in Peckham, and that we work in an environment or in a geographical place in London which had the highest concentration of the Nigerian diaspora, and also a public arena in Peckham platform and in Peckham space to host the bus.
But the idea was to bring together some kind of celebratory commemorative artwork that commemorated obviously the 20th anniversary of the the Ogoni 9 and Ken Saro-Wiwa. So I was going to create the artwork for the poster, but the other part of this was we actually created a metal sheet, in effect a metal poster, so made out of steel, based on the words that Alfredo used, that were part of a speech that Ken had made. And the idea is that metal sheet would then also hang inside the bus when it goes to its resting place in the Ogoni lands. So in a way, therefore, then the metal again with those words becomes another piece that unites the two artists, if you see what I mean, or the three artists.
And we were very lucky that my friend and colleague Michael Macmillan, working with Peckham Platform, was able to produce an exhibition, an installation, and a number of events around the bus in Peckham Platform to kind of somehow help ease that process to make its way back to Nigeria, and to remind people in London the importance of that journey.
bus arrived in Peckham Square, what was amazing was how many young people, local people, a lot of them Nigerian or African, knew of Ken Saro-Wiwa, knew of his story, were affected by him, were inspired by him, felt that he was still, 20 years after he's been executed, a very important beacon for fighting against oppression and freedom, not only in Africa but around the world. And I was really taken aback by this, you know. And so we felt it would be important to leave a memory or create some kind of memory of the boss, even though he had left. And so working with Peckham Platform, we were thinking, what could we do to celebrate, to mark the arrival of the bus when it arrived in Peckham Square? And so the idea came about of doing some kind of public performance. And I was interested, how could I make these young people connect with this story of Ken Saro-Wiwa and the Ogoni people and Shell that was taking place thousands of miles away? How would you get young people interested? Well, one of the obvious things is that as a result of what Shell is doing, the Ogoni people are experiencing displacement, dispossession, and questions of belonging. Now, the urban phenomena that's taking place in London, not only London, is gentrification, hyper-gentrification. And areas like Peckham are now experiencing this. And that means that, for instance, you know, you're having new developments, so-called affordable housing, but no one local can afford to live there, so they're having to move out. And when we raise this kind of theme with these young people, what I was surprised about is that they could connect with this issue of gentrification. They were aware, even in their young age, of certain places disappearing. And we began to use this as part of the story. So we got 2 episodes of Bassie and Co. And then we had the photographs, which had been taken by Sam Roberts, which we reproduced as wallpaper. We had the filming, which was done by Dub Morphology, who I've been working on a number of projects. And I also produced the script, the performance script, so people could see there's an element of text, how this came about. We had some books from Ken Saro-Wiwa, some of his writing, because people might not know he's a writer, he's not just an activist, he was a writer. We had a second kiosk, which we made out of the pallet wood, which was, we had on a title, Generate Your Own Electricity. And this was providing an activity for young people to begin to understand what is electricity, because, you know, our society, advanced, developed society, depends on it so much, but we don't actually know where electricity comes from. It's this invisible thing that comes through the wires, but how is it produced? And one of the things that Ken Saro-Wiwa was concerned about is in the 21st century, coming into how is energy going to be produced?
And last year, 2015, the boss left United Kingdom to Nigeria. When he got to the port in Nigeria, the boss was seized by the Nigerian Customs and Excise. Because the boss had an inscription, I accuse the oil companies of genocide. That's exactly what was there. I accused the oil companies of genocide. So they thought that that was the boss that cannot be allowed into Nigeria, and they seized the boss. There was an international outcry. Activists complained, many people talked about it, social media was everywhere. Yet the boss was not released. Even up till as I speak, the head of customs had been summoned by the National Assembly several times and he refused to appear. That will tell you the high level of impunity in that society. The boss represented the struggle of the Ogoni people and how Mossop and the Ogoni people have been able to organize themselves peacefully and non-violently to execute a struggle of this magnitude. That is what the boss is about. But yet, we have been denied access to that boss by the Nigerian government. And we know that the oil company's hand is underneath it. That is the story of the boss.